Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Opera San Antonio's Beyond the Production. This is our live interview series taking artists off the stage and into our community to share their experiences in the operatic arts. My name is Lauren Meeker, and I'm the General and Artistic Director of Opera San Antonio. And joining me, as always, is my fabulous partner in crime, Francesco Miliotto. Good afternoon. Hi, Francesco. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Lauren?
Well, I'm always great when I get to see you, mostly because I've been apart from you for so long. So these virtual experiences are the only time I get to see you.
But soon we'll be in the same city making beautiful music.
It is true. So to our audience, whether you're watching us live or joining us later today, thank you for watching this interview. For everyone to know, all of these interviews in our Beyond the Production series are stored and can be watched later on both Opera San Antonio's Facebook page and on our YouTube page. So I encourage you to watch now, watch later, and help us spread the word. The reason Francesco and I are so excited to be able to see each other soon is because here at Opera San Antonio, we are gearing up for our 90-minute highlights concert performance of Lucia di Lammermoor. We start rehearsals in a little over a week, which is incredible to me.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and our performances are on May 6th and May 8th. So if you're watching, I encourage you to get your tickets now because they're going fast, which is so thrilling. I'm confident, Francesco, I'm speaking for both of us when I say that we are excited to return to live performance after what's really been over a year away from the theater, right?
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. I just cannot wait to get back into the Tobin Center with this incredible cast and some of whom we're going to meet today and the incredible San Antonio Symphony. I can't wait. I can't wait.
Well, let's get our guests into the room with us. We've got 4 artists from our cast of Lucia di Lammermoor joining us for this episode today. And I would like to welcome Musa, Claudia, Andy, and Rick. Give me 1 second, gang. I'm going to pull you into the stream. Here's Musa. Yay.
Hello.
Here's Claudia. Yay. Here's Andy. Yay. And then here's Rick.
Yay.
Awesome.
I feel like we should have a cheer.
I feel like I put us on a game show. Yay. Can you tell I'm so extraordinarily excited to work with all of you? How fun.
Oh, I think this is absolutely going to be fantastic. And I'm meeting most of you for the first time when we all get to San Antonio. I've known Musa for a little while. We've done a couple things together, but I'm really excited to see and meet Claudia and Andy and Rick. I'm really excited to do that. But Lauren always lets me do the first set of questions. So I'm going to start with the lovely lady of the group, Claudia Chapa. If you don't mind, if you could tell us what the character that you're singing for us in the production of Lucia. And also my favorite question, what was your first artistic experience or your first experience in this art that led you to make a life out of opera?
I am performing the role of Alyssa. That's my homegirl.
Love it.
And my first operatic experience that changed my life was I went on a choir trip to actually Austin to see their Bohème. And I had never really seen anything like that before. And afterwards, we were all crying, obviously, because the music's beautiful and the acting's beautiful. But honestly, I was crying because I had just witnessed some of the most amazing superhuman abilities of performance, and I was the end. Hooked me up, signed me.
Yeah, I mean, I always say that this is the greatest thing we can do together. The greatest artistic thing humans can do together is opera, because it literally incorporates everything that we do. So I'm so glad that had that positive of an impression on you. Absolutely fantastic. Lauren, sorry.
Claudia, how old were you when you went on that trip?
I was 22. So I was on the.
I love that.
I was because I didn't grow up listening to European classical music, so it wasn't like something that was around me. So it was my choir and stuff like that, but it was my very first experience with anything like that.
That's so cool.
Fantastic. Now I'm going to split the two tenors for a second here, but we'll start with Rick. So Rick, if you could tell us who you're playing in the production and your first artistic experience that led you to this life.
Sure, I'm singing the role of Normanno in this production. This is my second time.
Thank you for all the doubles. Thank you.
You're welcome. My dopios. There you go.
Diction on the side. Diction on the side.
Yeah, this is my second time singing this role. I did it in 2005, so it's been a while. But no,
it never leaves.
I was 16 years old. I just got in a car, and my dad said it's time to go wash the car, and we went through the wash tub, if you know that business. And they had a bunch of cassettes in there. My dad bought me a Pavarotti tape, and I was a closet Pavarotti fan. Every time I got in my '85 Buick LeSabre, I'd throw him on, and just marveled at his voice. And then my voice teacher took me to see Don Pasquale in Austin, and then Turandot in Houston with Michael Sylvester as Calaf. And right after Nessun, I turned to Mark Puente and I said, I want to do this with my life. So, yeah, it was. Wow, I was hooked.
That's outstanding. I mean, no better person than Pavarotti to get you hooked. No. Tapes, cassettes, doesn't make any difference. I
still have the tapes, so.
Oh well, there you go.
I love it.
But do you have a way to play that tape? Is my question.
That's more difficult. Yeah.
See what I mean? Now, Musa and I have known each other for a little while. We did Moby Dick together and Tosca at the COC last, but I cannot wait to see you again and hang out. I know it's been a little while, brother, but tell me, who are you playing in Lucia and what your first? I know that this is going to be a great story because I know all about the book. I know everything. So tell me.
Playing Raimondo, the chaplain, the reverend, the pastor. I've always loved this role. I think I heard it for the first time in the opera history class. I was 21. And I had listened to other operas before, like Mozart operas and some Rossini operas. And I've always loved the bel canto because I feel that for my voice, it just flows on that legato. I love that. I cannot do runs. So the parts that do all the fast, the roles that do that, I can't. I always begrudge people who can do that. But this one is on the cantabile side.
Yes.
I think the recording was with Cesare Siepi. And the one that I had, and he was such a big voice, I knew that I didn't even think it was possible that I could sing it, because when you listen to people like Siepi or Giaurov, they make it seem impossible for anyone else to sing it.
Right.
I would add George London into that group of people who, when you listen to, you're like, let me just stop singing, because whatever I'm doing is just a waste of time. So when I had that, I always wanted to do it. Then I remember in 2010 when I did the Hans Habor Belvedere competition in Vienna, I was offered this role as part of the Vienna Chamber Opera. But then I had to make a decision between that or going to school here in the US. And so I made that decision to come to the school. And I always felt I was unready for the role. Now I realize some people may say the role is not that big, it's a medium role. But in terms of singing, as much as it's not that difficult, but if you are not immersed yet in that style of singing, I don't think you could do it. But I'm so excited to do it. If ever I was going to sing anything out after the pandemic, then let it be bel canto, because it pushes you to go back to the elementary stages of singing and just stick to proper way of singing, if I may.
Everything is bel canto, baby. Everything is bel canto. Exactly. It's all based on it. It's all based on it. Now, last and certainly not least, and whom I've known about Andy for a really long time. I'm so glad that we're finally working together. Dave. It's going to be a huge pleasure to meet you in a couple of weeks. But tell me, I mean, I already know, but tell the people, listening and watching who you're going to play and what your first experience was that led you to a life of music.
Yeah, so this is I'm singing Arturo, and I mean, it's sort of, I promise the story's real. So I grew up in a very classical family, classical music family as well. And I sort of was very nervous to select chorus as my elective in middle school. But I grew up, I mean, there's a video of me like with like a microphone that's not plugged in singing Como la Flor and like the entire Selena album because that was me as a kid.
Wow.
But I got the opportunity to take chorus in middle school, and it was 6th grade. And my chorus teacher was actually a retired opera singer because his wife was going through some health issues. And he came up to me like 2 weeks into the course, and he was like, "Hey, I think you have, you know, something for singing, and I would love to give you voice lessons for free if your family's willing." And that sort of evolved into me really falling in love with singing, and him being my mentor. And then we had this like dress rehearsal night for an opera, the first opera I've ever been to. And it was actually Lucia. It was Lucia di Lammermoor at the Florida Grand Opera.
Fantastic.
And we sat in the balcony first row, and I was like up, like looking the entire time, fascinated with the orchestra, with the entire show. And it's been a show that sort of lived in my life for a while in soundscape. But very similarly to you, Musa, I was like, I don't know when this is going to be the right time to approach.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm easing in. I'm happy that I'm singing Arturo, and then I'm also going to be in the room to be able. I'm currently prepping Edgardo for later this season. So it's
fabulous.
It's going to be a great year of sort of a throwback opera for me.
Wow, fantastic. Awesome. That is incredible. I love all of that.
That's great. Well, we've got some folks here who are excited to see you all. This is Veronica, who's our artistic administrator. If you haven't met her yet, you will. She thinks you guys are beautiful, and I couldn't agree more. And we also have one of our favorite donors who joins us for all sorts of events, Sue Turner, welcoming all of you to San Antonio. And hey, we know this lady. We just interviewed
Yes, we do.
Today. Vanessa's saying so many amazing people and faces on one screen and soon in one theater, which is so exciting. I cannot wait. So clearly the love is coming through, gang. Let's circle back for just a second. I want to give our audience a little more information on who each of you are. And how you're sort of coming to join us here in San Antonio, whether you're making your debut here or whether you've been with us before. I'm going to start swing back around to Claudia and say, okay, so you had this experience at 22, big impact on you. So what do you do to then begin to shape your life to get you to a point where you're becoming an opera singer? How did that work for you?
Well, it's like going into a room blindfolded, like a dark room, blindfolded, and you're like, oh. No, the same thing about, like Andy said, I had mentors. And really mentors they can either break you or they can really, really make you. And really, really set you up to be brave enough to try something that maybe wasn't an option before. I transferred the moment I saw that I was taking voice lessons. The head of the department of a junior college down in Laredo, Texas said, you know, I studied at UT Austin, and my teachers.
Yay.
So she came down, did a master class, and then we had a serious talk because originally I wanted to be a nurse. And she said, well, you can double major. Oh my God, are we the same?
Really? Cool.
But, you know, she said, you could double major. It's tough, but you can double major. And I thought I could do it. Why not? I came in, no. It was really difficult. And I started looking around. And also by that age, I was 23. And everyone in the theory classes and music history classes, these are like 17, 18-year-olds. So I'm not even feeling I'm feeling like I have to catch up. So it was just a lot of patience. That's something I heard a lot of. You have to be patient with yourself, your learning process, patient with how to meet the next person that could possibly guide you better. It was a lot of patience. It was, because I didn't have any classical music background before that, besides choir, it was a good way to keep me out of trouble. We weren't in the best neighborhood when we moved to the US. So it just made sense to put me in an elective that was cheap. Joke's on me, right? Like, you know, as a kid, it just put the kid in choir, and that, you know, you have to get your grades up to be part of it. And, you know, it's a bunch of choir kids. They're not doing anything crazy.
Right.
Mom, no. Right. So it just was a lot of patience and a lot of me just kind of asking questions and looking at other people's trajectory and who they took lessons with, and just being open to change, to shift. That's the story of that.
So how do you go from double majoring to, say, where I met you? We first bumped into each other, I think, at Glimmerglass, but we've now done shows at Glimmerglass. We've done shows at Opera Southwest. We've been together here at Opera San Antonio. How did you make that leap from school into the young artist and professional world?
When it was my last year of school, I want to tell you a little story. Long story short, there was a tenor that I bumped into on a bus stop, and he said, "Girl, don't ever graduate. It's tough out here." Okay. So I said, if I can get one job, it doesn't matter if I have to pay to do it, or it's a young artist program, or it's a regular job at a very, very small company. I just need to get one job to prove to myself and also my parents at this point that this is a good choice. And I was able to get one. It was my debut with Austin Opera. Right. After that, then I figured out, there's young artist programs. Because again, I don't have the structure that other people had. So I'm like, you're actually supposed to do young artist programs first. Awesome. So I auditioned for a couple of places. And I think by my third year of doing audition rounds, I got into Glimmerglass. And that's how we met.
Yeah. Awesome. And then here we are. So audiences in San Antonio, you've seen Claudia before, which was actually my first experience here as well, in Barber of Seville. And we're reuniting and it feels so good as we head into Lucia. I told you guys yesterday I don't sing a lot, and I think I lied. I just don't sing well.
I love it.
I love it. God.
Okay, awesome. More of that to come. So let me swing over to one of our other local heroes, Rick. You're joining us from New Braunfels. Is that correct?
Right. We live in New Braunfels. So.
Fabulous. So tell us a little bit. I will be working with you here for the first time at Opera San Antonio. Tell us a little bit about how you took the leap from discovering opera into the professional classical world.
Yeah, so I'm from San Antonio. I graduated from Madison High School back in '94, and then after Turandot, I changed my trajectory. It's kind of hard to say that word right now, but I wanted to be a history professor, so I switched before I got to college. I switched what I wanted to do into music, and went to Stephen F. Austin out in East Texas. Got a bachelor's and master's there. It was like an opera factory back then. So I did 16 operas in 6 years.
Oh my goodness.
We had a summer opera program there, and it was sometimes we do between 4 and 5 operas in the summer. So I had a lot of experience singing opera by the time I finished my master's. And then from there I went to Des Moines Metro Opera for 2 summers.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, and then I met Paula Homer and Doug McDonough, who were running the Young Artist program there. And Paula convinced me to go to North Texas. So I went there and sang some more opera, did Rodolfo and Bohème, and sang Alfredo and Traviata, and got to go to Italy with the North Texas group.
Right.
And then, from there, just started doing a lot of auditions. And I started actually teaching after a couple of years there. And I'm more on the academic side now, but I still get to sing a lot, perform in the summers and whenever gigs come up. So it's one of the benefits of being in an academic position is they want us out there performing. And now that we have Zoom, we can actually teach lessons over Zoom while we're out performing. So
you sure can. Yeah. Well, so, I'm going to take a moment to give a shout out to our chorus master, Dottie Randall, who, when Francesco and I both came on board a year ago, said, you need to know Rick Novak, look him up. So that's how, I mean, all props to her. She very much put us in touch with you and got you on our radar. And I'm so excited that you're joining us this spring. It's going to be great.
She's somewhat of my musical godmother in a way. Because I came home for Thanksgiving one year when I was in college, and she said, well, my voice teacher said, have you auditioned for young artist programs yet? I said, no. He said, well, there's a lady in San Antonio, Dottie Randall, you need to sing for her. And so I went to her house in Alamo Heights, sang a couple arias, and she said, you really need to send your materials to Robert Larson out in Des Moines. And I said, well, I think the deadline's passed. She said, just send them. So I sent them.
Deadline.
Yeah, and the day after they, that they got my materials, I got a call from Robert Larson inviting me to the Young Artist Program there. So that was all Dottie Randall with her fairy dust.
She's a great connector. She absolutely is. Yeah. So I'm going to go backwards for just a second because Claudia, you'll recognize Andrew Ward, who is with us as the officer in Barber of Seville, is saying yes and hello. So yay for Hometown Heroes. One of the things that I know Francesco and I are both super passionate about is finding ways to get to know who all is here in the community. And I consider Austin part of our community of fabulous artists. So I'm thrilled that Claudia and Rick, you are with us. We've also gone a little farther afield. Musa, we're just going to swing all the way across the globe because you grew up in South Africa. Is that correct?
Yeah. I'm from Port Elizabeth on the east coast of South Africa.
Fabulous.
I think about 440 miles east of Cape Town.
Wonderful. Nice. So tell us a little bit about how you took that next step in terms of becoming a professional classical operatic singer. What has your journey been like across the globe to get you where you are now?
Well, fortunately, I grew up in a country that is big on choral music because of all the missionary influence from Britain. And so I grew up listening to mostly choral, though, because opera was still unfamiliar with opera, but choral, a lot of choral music, including Messiah, Handel's Messiah, and all oratorios. But it's when I think at the age of 16, I, for the first time, saw an opera because a friend of mine who was a music student at the then University of Port Elizabeth, took out a VHS video of Magic Flute. And then do they even have stuff that plays VHS now?
I don't know.
We do. We have some in the opera.
Wow. Yeah, I had cassette tapes at the time, right? So I listened to that. It was a 1978 production they had done in Glyndebourne. Willard White did the role of the speaker there, and I didn't know what opera was. I knew what choral music was. I saw that the style was not so different from choral music or oratorio, especially the Handel oratorios. I thought it's just that the language was different. I'm familiar with Afrikaans, so it was not that different from Afrikaans. So someone told me it's German, so now I was interested. I was mostly interested because there was a black guy there doing opera. I really love the idea of the attention he got, with the costumes and, the lights on him and that commanding and imposing voice. I was like, I want to be like that guy. It took me a while to get there because, finishing from high school at home, they wanted me to do one of two things. It's either you're going to be a doctor or an engineer. We may settle for being a lawyer, but those are the three important things. So music, no, what's that? Especially opera music. No, that was still new to not South Africa, but the black population of South Africa because of the apartheid where everything was segregated. Yes. So that was new to me, but I wanted to do it. So I forced myself then to go through engineering school first to do civil engineering. But thank God we couldn't afford it. So after a year, I was like, I'm done with it. How about I take a gap year that I wanted before?
Yes.
And my mom thought I would be doing drugs if I didn't go to school immediately after high school. I don't know why, but that's what happened. So it's that gap here then after engineering school that helped me. Well, there was a friend of mine who was also a music student who said, let's start an ensemble, because we saw a local group do Christmas carols on TV, wanted to do that. Cut a long story short, I met a lady who's now late, Monica Oosthuizen, who must have been in her 80s at that time, who said, hey, I can introduce you to a pianist, Kopa Space. He is both a coach and a pianist at now the Nelson Mandela University, which was the Port Elizabeth University at the time. It's changed now to Nelson Mandela University. Kopa Space, we still keep in contact. He's a friend of mine. We've done 3 recitals in my hometown with him. So he started playing for us for free, teaching us music because we couldn't read music or write music. Because of him and Monica, we were introduced to Mimi Kutze, who's a South African soprano who used to sing in Vienna in the 60s and 70s. I auditioned for her in Pretoria, in the northern parts of South Africa, who said to me, we'd love to have you in our ensemble at the State Theatre, but you've never studied music. You can't read or write music. We can put you in the chorus, and we will put you in part of what they called an incubator scheme, an apprentice program of sorts where you go through, you study some music theory, but you do chorus. And then she said she felt it would be unfair on me because the people who did roles all had degrees or diplomas in music and had knowledge that I didn't possess. And so I would have to play catch up. She said, how about you audition and apply for a place of study in Cape Town? There you would study with Professor Angelo Gobato, who is from Milan, but grew up in South Africa. And he's the stage director. And you would study with Regina Davids, who's one of the leading teachers in South Africa. She's now retired from singing, but still teaches towards the end of retirement, I think so now. I said, I don't know who these people are, but if you can link me up with them, perhaps we can make something happen. So they called Virginia and they called Professor Angelo Gobato. And 3 weeks from my audition in Pretoria, I went to audition in Cape Town. Wow. And then a month after the audition, I was accepted for a place of study. So I moved my life from PE, Port Elizabeth, my hometown, to Cape Town. And it's in Cape Town when the professor now was retiring 4 years later that Kamal Khan, who's a pianist and a conductor based in New York, he's from Virginia, I think, who was now taking over as the director of the opera school. So we cultivated this important relationship between Kamal and I. And so I started doing all these international competitions because Kamal would teach me the music and coach me. And they said, once you are done here with your undergraduate studies, what do you want to do? I said, perhaps maybe go and study in England, because most South Africans go there, study at the Guildhall School of Music, the Royal College of Music, and so forth. Or maybe go to Germany and do a studio. He said, have you considered the US? I said, well, I don't know much. Can you tell me more? I know of Juilliard School of Music, but I don't think I can afford it. Or Indiana. He said, well, there's a school called the Academy of Vocal Arts in Philadelphia. There's another one called Curtis Institute of Music. They are smaller schools, but equally important. Maybe you can audition for them and see what happens, because I feel that for your voice, it's still too early to go directly into professional music. So maybe if you can get 3 or 4 more years of intense coaching, because at the University of Cape Town, I had, say, 1 or 2 coachings a week and 1 voice lesson. At AVA, I had 3 or 4 coachings a day.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of music that I would have to go through, and they do 4 operas a year. Whereas in the University of Cape Town, we did 1 or 2 operas a year. So 4 operas a year, and then a lot of concerts and recitals. So I was now ready for that. We auditioned for them. I got accepted. So I started at the AVA in 2010. It's from AVA then where I met Bill Gary, I think in 2013. Then he became a manager. We started working together with Bill Gary, and I would coach with coaches in New York and in Philadelphia. When I finished school, I decided, well, I'm based in Philadelphia. I've cultivated friendships here. I'm just going to be based in Philadelphia so that I just move around. It's cheaper to live here. It's closer to New York. And so that's what I've been doing now. My very first opera outside of school, I think, if I'm not mistaken, was La Boheme at the Kennedy Center. And from there, I've been lucky to be working every year, or take out the pandemic, of course, because it messed up everything. But I've been performing, and I'm so glad and excited to be doing a lot of, I mean, we did Moby Dick, which is great. And I also did Eugene Onegin there. But a lot of Italian music excites me because of all the types of singing that are good for the voice. And so to be doing a lot of bel canto now makes me so happy.
You're welcome. It's good. We're good. You're welcome. Invented opera. Best at it. Thank you. I understand. That's what I'm here to represent.
What an extraordinary journey. And I love the connective tissue between some artists who come to discover opera a bit later in life, some who discover it much earlier. I'm on the later side as well. I didn't discover the operatic arts until after I had graduated from my undergrad. The journey is just so different for all of us. It's a really beautiful story, Musa. So Andy, how do you get from a first Lucia exposure to now here going into Lucia with us at Opera San Antonio?
Yeah, it's been a long journey of a lot of different stuff, which is sort of I kind of want to talk about like the things that I've learned about the business as well through that journey, because both Claudia and Musa spoke about things that I think I relate to a lot. Claudia was talking about trying to understand everyone's journey and like the things that like we're told as young artists or as emerging artists or students. That we have to follow this track. There's this like young artist track and this like, you get into a lower tier summer program and then a higher tier one and then, and then a resident artist program. And the truth is that, yeah, that works for some people, but it doesn't work for everyone. I'm one of those people that maybe seemingly from the outside, that was a thing for me, but it actually wasn't. So when I saw my first Lucia, right, I was still in a world where I was, yes, getting some like classical training, but then later on, I went to a performing arts high school where I did primarily choral music, and then I had I can't talk about sort of my journey without talking about my queer experience. So I come from a Cuban family, and being gay is not something that is normal in the community's eyes and acceptance of it, at least in my family's, in my instance. And I was outed when I was in high school. And I was in a performing arts high school, and my parents were advised to take me out of the performing arts high school because there must have been someone there in the school that was influencing me to be gay. So that sort of like created a very complicated dynamic with me and music, on top of the very added thing that I think Musa talked about, which is like, in our culture, you're either a doctor or a lawyer, and like that's how you make money, and that's the expectation. So those were two big themes in my life, and then also there was the added pressure that I'm sure any singer gets. It's like, oh, you're a singer, so you should go do American Idol. You should go do all these things, and which not being critical of that. I myself ended up going onto a show on Telemundo called Aquí Todos Ganan when I was a teenager in high school.
Oh my goodness, I love it.
I won that, and I won
on YouTube. Can we like look
that up? I was just gonna say, do we have a clip of
that? No, there's some stuff. But yeah, I was on Aquí Todos Ganan, which later turned into Minuto de Fama, and they had like an all-star season. So I did that for several years throughout high school.
We will now all YouTube stock your past shows, Andy. Yeah. That's what's going to happen.
It's pretty tight knit, but I do have experience. I was part of the like Young Grammys Jazz Finals. So I did like a lot of vocal jazz. I did a lot of different types of music, which became very complicated when I got into university setting of very strict classical music.
Right.
So I went to Florida State for my undergrad, and that was a huge deal because I was the first person in my entire family to leave home. And that was very difficult. A lot of that was actually because my family and I weren't on good talking terms. I actually moved out with my boyfriend at the time, and we were like, we're going to get away and we're going to be gay, sort of thing, which was difficult. And I was in a very fortunate place because I had money from the TV show that I had won, that I had saved.
Good for you.
School. So that was a very lucky situation. Had that not happened, I wouldn't have been able to do that. And I went to Florida State, and there I studied with a couple teachers, but the most important part of that journey was that I was actually given a lot of opportunities as an undergrad to sing roles, which was what made me really fall in love with the art form. My first big role was Sam Kaplan in Street Scene, and that sort of like leans into my English language opera and sort of new works that I'm still very fascinated by. After that, I went to IU for my undergrad, or for my master's. And there I also had a lot of really formative experiences. That's where I did Arcadio in Florencia for the first time. That was my first Spanish opera experience. And I was like, oh, wow, I get to sing in my first language, and this is amazing. Although I have to say, I almost quit opera my first year, my first semester at IU. I was like, this is too hard. I can't deal with this. I can't see a way in which I'm going to make money. My family doesn't like that I'm doing this. No one believes that I could make money off of it. That's the big thing, like student loans and all these things, even with scholarships, you have to make a living. And someone mentioned, it's like it's a waiting game opera, right? It's like when you fall into the right path of what your actual specialty is going to be, that's when you it's like wait until your 30s. And I was like, I can't wait. So that's I think it was during my time at IU that I started to realize that if I remove all of my emotions around my voice, right, and remove my voice as my work from myself and my value as a person, that it's far more healthy from a mental health standpoint. Because as singers, we all know we get a ton of no's. Like you get way more no's in your lifetime than you get yeses. And everyone has to deal with that, even the people that get a lot of yeses. So the quicker you can remove your voice from your value as a human, which is not an easy feat, the quicker it is to be able to say, oh, this is actually a business, and what I have to do is network and make sure that the product that I'm offering is something that is consistent. The environment in which I can create in the workplace for other people is really important, and that's something that's actually going to get you rehired. So once you start to understand that level of preparation, that's a huge thing in this business. Then it's like, oh, actually, as long as I can stick around, and make it through and survive, I will work in this business. So I think that was a heart-to-heart that I had with a couple people that are still very close mentors to me.
That's amazing.
And
well,
I think advice.
I was just going to hop in, Andy, to say, I think what you're talking about in terms of artist health and life health is important to all of us. And what I love and have always loved about being in the operatic arts is how many different, unique wonderful, extraordinary people are drawn to this art form. And even just looking at who's on this experience today, just all of you as guests and myself and Francesco with such different backgrounds, with such different life experiences, to be able to combine those into one place and one time and learn from each other and present something valuable to share with the world. It's because you all are brave enough to share your stories. And thank you, Andy, for sharing your story, and Musa and Claudia and Rick. I think it's how we make the world a better place as we all, work our way through it together. So Andy, that's just gorgeous. And all of you, thank you for giving us insight on how we all get to where we are. Because as Musa said, I think it's important to see representation and to see different colleagues on the stage for every city and town and country and nation that we all bring this powerful art form to. So yay, San Antonio, let's keep the good work going.
Yes, absolutely.
How do we combine that? We have all these fabulous artists on stage. And Francesco and I are lucky enough to be in a position where we can bring you all together. And for some of you on this call, you've joined us on the journey sooner or later in this process, but here we all are together to create a little show called Lucia di Lammermoor. So we're headed into, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this interview, Opera San Antonio's return to the theater for the first time in over a year. Because live performances were really put on hold. I'm sure that is true for almost every artist on this call. Live performances have been put on hold really for the last year due to the pandemic. And we're just starting to figure out ways to be able to keep you as artists healthy and safe as we return to the theater, to keep audiences and staff members healthy and safe. And so we're putting together what I have no doubt will be an absolutely brilliant 90-minute highlights concert of Lucia. Now, my guess is because opera and this company are relatively new to San Antonio, that we're going to have folks watching today and joining us in performance who maybe are completely unfamiliar with bel canto repertoire, or more specifically, unfamiliar with Lucia. So I'm going to show a quick little promo video that we've put together for this opera. And then after that, I'd love to talk to each of you about how your life is influencing the character and the roles that you're playing and some of the really important themes that come up in this opera. So take a look at this video we've prepared for you all today. All right, so here's the breakdown. Lucia di Lammermoor is essentially a Scottish Romeo and Juliet love story based on Sir Walter Scott's 1819 novel, The Bride of Lammermoor, allegedly based on a real incident. We've got Lucia, who falls in love with Edgardo, son of her father's family rival, and he falls in love with her as well. Lucia's evil brother Enrico forbids their love and forces her to marry Arturo. That's the major plot. However, for those of you who find Romeo and Juliet a little bit subdued, Lucia di Lammermoor is sprinkled with more drama. In this case, a ghost, fake news, insanity, and, spoiler alert, a wedding night bridegroom murder. Lucia di Lammermoor is one of the greatest bel canto masterpieces. From Lucia's madness, the operatic gold standard for going insane, the mad scene is born. In this mad, mad world of ours, you don't want to miss this triumph. Well, all right then. Just a few big, tough topics to tackle in this extraordinary 90-minute version. I'm going to see if we can go through the... Oh, yeah, Francesco?
I want you to do all short opera version things in a podcast. I want all of them done. Everything. Everything like that with cartoons, comics, just you narrating.
All right, so... Yes, I narrated it, but I have to give a special shout out to Diana Pena, who's our newest board member, who was the driving force behind putting that video together. And she said, I want something fun. I want something that's fast. I want something that's engaging. And she worked with her team to put it together. So yay, Diana. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you.
Yes. So let me see if I can do this in order, and then I'll really call myself out if I'm a bad director. Maybe we go through this in order of what would be your character appearance. Now, granted, we've cut some scenes in this, which we'll talk about in a second. But if we do this right, Normanno, you would appear in the first scene with Enrico and Musa as Raimundo. So let's start there, maybe. Rick, tell us a little bit about who is Normanno. How does that character sit within this piece?
Yeah, he's the captain of the guard, is what you would read in a synopsis. But he's really the guy that is head of the security for the property. But he's also the bad guy in this in many ways. He's the guy that can get stuff done. He's a tough guy, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to please his employers. In this case, the Ashtons. So he also intercepts and forges letters. And so at the end of the opera, Musa's character says, "It's you. It's your fault." And I don't know that Normanno had that bad intent, but that's kind of what he evolves into in the show. So hopefully I'm not Normanno in real life. So,
I hope not as well.
But I think he's a hard worker. He's a tough guy. I think of Braveheart when I think of Scottish things, and they lived a much harder life than we do. They don't enjoy a lot of the luxuries that we do with air conditioning and modern medicine and technology. And so he must have been good with horses and swords and knives. And I kind of get the sense that he's been in battle a time or two. And that's one of the reasons he's put in charge, is because he's somewhat of a badass that the men can look up to and follow orders. So, that's Normanno for me. And I think he also is the guy that says to Enrico, "Hold on now, you shouldn't be afraid about this. I have everything under control, and here's the reason why." And he lists 3 things in one of the recitatives. So I think he also plants seeds with Enrico and says, "This is how we can get this done, boss." So,
one of the themes that we'll talk about in a little bit, but that you're pointing towards, is I think needing to point out in this opera how important family or clan relationship is, and how that's really held as the driving force for the actions of a lot of characters. So, I'm a firm believer that bad guys don't think of themselves as bad guys. They think they're executing objectives in order to keep their families in power and intact. And I think you're the arm of the Ashton family to get that done. And if that means he has to create tactics to really keep the family on the course he believes is right, I think I agree with you 100%, Rick. From another perspective, those are dastardly choices, but from his perspective, it's what's right to keep the family moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I in the novel, it's Lucia's mom, or Lucy in the novel. Lucy's mom, is the one coming up with these sinister plans, and so I'm kind of channeling a little bit of Lady Ashton, a little bit, I think.
I love that, because we don't get to see Lady Ashton. So I'm just going to put a pin in that for when we get into rehearsal, Rick. That's a great idea. And Jim McCutcheon, who's a member of our board, is in Greece. I'm just putting this up because he says, "Fantastic point, Lauren." No, I'm just kidding. I think it is a fantastic point for the entire scope of the show, just how we keep all of these time period concerns, points of focus concerns in the big picture. And that actually swings me over to Musa, because in the role of the chaplain, a character that is literally calls himself the hand of God on earth at points in this opera, that comes with a whole series of weight and responsibility in terms of, shepherding and guiding a lot of the characters in the piece. You're not necessarily adverse to holding the family first as well, but tell us a little more about Raimundo and your thoughts on him, Musa.
It's interesting because I think it also touches on the case and question of the separation of state and the church. This guy is aware that he's supposed to support Lucia because she's in love with someone else. He's supposed to honor that because of that, but he'll stick with the family. he'll coax her to say, hey, for the betterment of the family, for the safety of the family. So I think he's conflicted. It's interesting. I find it strange because when they try to fight, he comes in and says, commandingly so and imposing and with some nobility, he says, I am the voice of God, right? If you kill someone, then you'll die also by the sword. So stop this nonsense, which begs the question, if he has that commanding presence, why couldn't he have spoken to her brother in the beginning, or Normando for that matter, and say, whatever you are planning now? He of course, he wasn't aware of the letter, but at some point he does get aware, maybe too late. But why couldn't he have spoken to Enrico for that matter and says, hey, what you're trying to do is wrong to your sister? That begs the question, and I don't have any answers for it. And so he's conflicted. For music-wise, it sounds so beautiful, but then when you get to the words, you're like, you coward.
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah. But I think, I just speaking as, a woman living in 2021 who is free to love whomever she wants, it's very easy to read the story, I think, and go, well, of course, Lucia should be allowed to marry Edgardo or date Edgardo. Why would that never be what's the obvious choice? But if our brains go back, I think, to how families operated and how money and wealth and power operated and what society was upholding as important, being with someone from a rival clan was just simply a no-no, let alone a woman marrying for love. That's not a thing. You come with a dowry, you're a piece of property, and you are to do what your family says is right. And I think Raimundo, as the family priest, would be on board with keeping the family in power. Even someone as powerful and heart-driven as he isn't living in 2021. He doesn't have the perspective to look at that and say, well, Lucia really should be allowed to go do this. Why are we asking her to marry Arturo? And that's something that, as a society now, is a great question for us to look at and say, what do we value? How do we help people be free? How do we give women or anyone, not even just women, anyone, the right to choose who they want to be with and keep society moving forward?
It's interesting because now you've reminded me, coming from South Africa, I have a perspective about missionaries or the pastors, not now, but the ones who came in 1800s. They didn't just come as missionaries to teach the natives Christianity. No, they were in bed with the state, because the narrative of the state is that you have to change these people how they think. We want their land. So they've been fighting with us for 100 years. And so we've been unable to take that by force. So maybe we should try a new technique. You're going to use the Bible because you are using it, and then you're just going to change them. They are very much religious, but you just have to convince them that they are worshiping the devil. There's only one God, and our way of worshiping. So you're going to use that. So I'm not sure whether the missionaries had ever fought with the state about that, but I know that they did it. They killed no one, but they convinced people that after 100 years of fighting between the Xhosa people, my people, and the British Empire, that this is a waste. All this land, everything you're fighting for, you can get a better of parts of it in heaven. So give up that. So you're right that the missionaries, not today, but the missionaries in those days, 1600s, 1500s, they were in bed. There was no such separation between state and the church. State and the church were one.
Well, and that's a very fair point about we're dealing with two warring clans at least. And Andy, we'll get to you in a second as Arturo marrying in as a third clan. But there's very clear objectives with all of the characters in this piece, which is family first and society first. No matter what your position, whether it's priest or guard or head of the family, what those may be. And then there's Elisa over here, Claudia. So you're probably the person who is closest to Lucia in a lot of ways, or at least that's how I perceive her. But talk a little bit about your character and her role within the opera.
Well, one, I just want to say men stay trying to govern women's bodies still to this day. So we're not that far off.
So another big theme we're dealing with. Yes.
Yeah, it's just kind of the thing. And Alyssa, she's a handmaiden, but she really is her companion when no one else is watching. So it's this weird kind of relationship. I'm approaching her with a lot of sympathy because she's part of a system and she's a woman. Yeah. In those days, they didn't really have a lot of options. Alyssa could have been a country girl coming into the family, working herself up to where she is with Lucia. There was, I think, 2 options for women in that time. Either you work for a family or you work at a brothel. These are the options that the women had at that time. So when she, her sole purpose is just to keep Lucia alive, Lucia safe, because can she help her with her emotions? No. Can she help her with her spirituality? No. She can just keep her alive. So when she talks to her and she's confiding to her, like, I'm seeing ghosts, girl. It's a lot. It's a lot for her. She's like, hi, so then don't do this. Like, how about we stop this right now? So then, it's an omen. So she's highly superstitious, but she's also part of the system. She's complicit in it. She can't help her. She can't get her out of it. She can't give her advice. Even if she did, Lucia's not going to follow it. So she's in a really tough position, Alyssa.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, Lucia's hand gets forced by the machinations of Rick, your character, Normano, with the influence Musa from your character, obviously also from her brother. Mm-hmm. And what those characters are all geared towards doing is trying to use Lucia to help save the family, right? So Lucia and Enrico, her brother, are looking for ways to be able to keep the family name elevated. It's really not in a great position at the start of the opera. And so there's an alliance that's happening with the men behind closed doors. And that's where Andy, your character comes into play, which is another family with the Bucklaws being able to marry into the Ashton clan via you and Lucia. So here's this other idea of arranged marriages, I think, as well, which is also a hot topic button. Anyway, Andy, tell us a little bit about your perspective on Arturo and how he fits into this very complex puzzle we're talking about.
Yeah, well, oof.
Yeah, easily so. Yeah.
Yeah, yikes. So obviously we can't divorce context here as we continue to talk about. So yeah, I mean, we're early 18th century, and women are definitely property here. So I think for Arturo, it's a lot about the level of pride he gets to bask in when he comes in and he saves the day. Which politically elevates his family's name.
Yep.
Because it really is an investment for him to basically give money to the Ashton family in order to elevate them, right? However, I think that Arturo is extremely complicit in all of the things that the men are doing behind closed doors. He is the facilitator of it. And he is the one that physically agrees to rape Lucia, essentially, because it is extremely obvious that she is not willing to marry him, let alone sleep with him. And in the, historically speaking, the marriage was always consummated.
Whether it was willing or not. Yes.
Whether it was willing or not. Which we hear so much about later in this opera, and we even Edgavda makes a reference about the lights being on still in the castle, and that they're probably or in their bedroom, so they're probably consummating the marriage. Although obviously we've already seen the mad scene by that point. So for me, it's a big role mentally to step into a space of privilege and and just years of society allowing Arturo to bask in wealth that comes from so much pain and so much abuse of women.
Yeah. One of the things I could talk about this for hours, and this is why we do rehearsal, so that we get to unpack all of these things, which I love. But what's so fascinating that each of you has talked about from your perspectives is that I think masterpieces like Lucia are masterpieces for two really huge reasons. One, they are powerful music and dramatic pieces that capture our souls in ways that we cannot escape. But art also at its finest, I think, has always tackled issues that humanity faces head on and presents scenarios that are wrapped up in packages that are extremely complex to unravel. And my favorite thing as a stage director, I think Francesco echoes this as a music director as well, is being given the gift of taking these pieces that are perceived as beautiful, or literally in this case, bel canto, beautiful singing. And when you start to, as artists, weave the web and put all the puzzle pieces together, to mix two different metaphors, it really ends up being a beautifully complicated package that I think audiences can walk away from really taking in lots of different themes that can resonate and that we're still struggling with as society now. So we have only barely scratched the surface of some of the multitude of themes that come up in this opera, whether it's looking at societal issues or how men and women treat each other, or even mental health, which we didn't even totally get into in this episode, but we will in future episodes, especially as we continue conversations with the cast. So I'm going to encourage everybody who's watching us today to embrace the beauty of the piece and embrace the themes of the piece. And if you haven't seen an opera before, this is a really gorgeous way to meet some extraordinary artists like you who are on the call with us this afternoon, hear some extraordinary music, and also learn something, I think, extraordinary about ourselves while we get to sit in the theater and have a communal experience together. I'm excited for that. Are you guys excited for that? I think
absolutely.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, like I said, tip of the iceberg. I can't believe that hour went so fast, but I thank you for being able to be here and lend your insights. So a big shout out, Musa, Claudia, Andy, and Rick, for being such extraordinary and wonderful guests today.
Thank you, guys.
Also to thank you. Also to our audience, we hope you'll join us again for upcoming interviews as we continue unpacking Lucia with our cast members. Tickets are on sale now. Our performances are on May 6th and May 8th. And all you need to do is go to operasa.org and you'll find all sorts of information on our tickets, on how to learn about our health and safety policies, and how to rejoin us back in the theater. So that's a really great catch-all place for any questions you might have about what we're doing here at Opera San Antonio. So again, thank you for watching. We really hope you've enjoyed this insight and perspective on our artists who are involved with this wonderful production. Have a lovely afternoon, and we'll see everybody again in just a couple of weeks. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Ciao. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Ciao. Bye-bye.